This whole idea of, oh, the oil companies in America are privately owned, it is a lie. It is a secret strategy that some people in the American government have devised to use their own multinational companies to secure influence and buy over, probably even dissolve the sovereignties of other countries that allow them, by asking for devaluation of their currencies, by asking for removal of subsidies, and by asking for privatization. So they will come in the name of foreign direct investment through the World Bank and say they want to give us loan or they want to buy over our corporation because we have privatized. And because we have removed subsidy, which they forced us to do, they will now sell our products and services at exorbitant prices to maximize their profit. Profits that they can now repatriate with ease through the unification of the FX window. That's what they are doing. And people are clapping for them. It is a shame. It is a shame because you see people that are supposed to be learned, people who are supposed to know, and they simply don't know because they have been taught garbage. It's not me saying it now. I'll play you this video and then you tell me.
Okay, and the World Bank continued it. They forced most countries to eliminate all food subsidies and food support. Because once you don't produce your own food, I increase my control over it. How do we know this? Well, very funny thing happened some years ago. Not so funny, actually. It involved starvation of a large number of people in Malawi. Okay? Many of you could remember this because it was really tragic. But the Malawian finance minister, who was under terrible threat at the time, suddenly broke ranks and he said, well, you know why we had this famine? Because one of the conditions of the loan given by the World Bank was we destroyed all our grain surplus stocks. Why? Because remember, we want you dependent.
Did you see that? They want us dependent. That is exactly why they are forcing us to remove subsidies. There's a previous part of this video where Nicholas Howard was describing how America and the EU and UK are the countries with the biggest subsidies for health, education, even these private companies, they subsidize them. Yet they come to Nigeria, they come to Africa, and they tell us through the IMF and the World Bank, which is serving their purpose anyway, they tell us to remove subsidies. They tell us to remove subsidies. Now, if the subsidy, particularly the fuel subsidy in Nigeria, was even existent in the first place, then asking us to remove the subsidy is still wrong morally, because they themselves are keeping those subsidies in their own end. They subsidize their own oil companies. In America, they do. Meanwhile, they come to Nigeria and ask us to remove subsidies. Now, subsidy in Nigeria never existed. It was a fraud. Them asking us to remove subsidy is not remove subsidy directly. They are asking us to increase the pump price of petrol so that when we now ask them to come and give us foreign direct investment, they will give us the loans that never leave their countries and use those loans to buy up private companies here by way of investment and begin to produce goods and services for us and sell at exorbitant prices, prices that makes them more competitive than we are. And our people are falling for it. The likes of Dangote, they are falling for it. It is such a shame. And we have business people that are falling for these things. In fact, the most annoying one is Kingsley Moghalu coming on national TV to say that devaluation of the Naira is good. That he was even advising Tinubu that Tinubu should not strengthen the Naira because it will not make us competitive. Really? Let me play this video. You will see exactly why people like Kingsley Moghalu, people like Ngozi Nkonjo Iweala are a failure to Africa and to Nigeria. Many people hail them, but really, they are just failures because they are not able to defend the interest of Nigeria against these world powers. They are just there serving, doing the bidding of these world powers. I'll play you the video now.
1970s, the US Senate, the US Congress said, we will not allow Latin America to produce their own food. We will start a strategy involving the IMF and the World Bank to destroy food self-sufficiency of Latin America. Then they will indeed be our true backyard. And that's exactly what they've done. Look at all the Latin American countries. Look at them. They used to be food self-sufficient, but they're no longer food self-sufficient. Now here comes the kicker. We have now in the WTO something called the Agreement on Agriculture. Okay? You know what that Agreement on Agriculture states? It says, if you don't have any subsidies, you're not allowed to put these subsidies on food. But if you have subsidies and income support for food production, you can keep them. Who has all the subsidies and income support? US, Europe. The largest budgets in the world for supporting their farmers are Europe and US. But the World Bank and IMF have destroyed all those subsidies. You see, all those subsidies have been destroyed. And now we're telling these countries, you don't have subsidies? Tough luck, you know. You see, we're keeping them dependent. We're keeping them on a string. We have lots of examples in the WTO to really stop Africa industrializing. This is the crucial thing. We cannot allow them to produce manufacturers. It's not difficult. Trust me, it's not difficult. We need nationalist governments. We need them committed to industrialization, and it won't take them a decade to move out from where they are. This is the fundamental point. It's not difficult. But this next round of the WTO is designed to block that. If we had time, I would go through all the different things that they're trying to put into place to block anyone else getting on top of the ladder. You've read this book of Hajun Chang, Kicking Away the Ladder. You see, when we become rich, we make sure the others can't climb up the ladder and join us. Okay? And this is what this next Doha round is about. It's to make sure, especially sub-Saharan African countries, do not escape. You see, we teach, in many cases, garbage. And it doesn't hurt anyone, a lot of this garbage. You know, it's just blah, 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 blah. And we don't know what we have learned, but anyway, we were there at the university and you got a certificate and you go away and you feel you've learned something. But sometimes we teach very destructive things. No more important than when we're teaching people from developing countries. Okay, and one of those very damaging and destructive things is the doctrine of comparative advantage. It's a lie from beginning to end. It has been decimated many times, but we keep it in every curriculum. Why? Because it tells sub-Saharan African countries that their destiny is to produce raw materials, you see. And if you produce raw materials, you get rich just like we are in the West. You see, this is the game we're playing. And just for you to be totally confused, we normally build models with it, mathematical models. So you really have no idea what we're talking about. But it seems all very scientific. Then we have the modern version of this is because it's all a failure. We know it's a failure. We now have a new generation of economists saying, it's only a failure because you're all corrupt in your countries. We call that new institutional economics. You've all probably learnt it all, but you didn't know why they invented it. It was invented to tell you the same thing. You should keep producing raw materials. Now, don't be as corrupt as you were before. Nobody ever told you that aid was designed to actually start the corruption process in the first place. Okay, and we need corruption to make sure you're doing all these things. But now we blame the victim. You're poor because it's your fault, basically. And you're poor, stupid, and corrupt. basically. This is the message that we're giving people.
You know, it's a shame that we have top Nigerians like Ngozi Nkonjo Iweala at the WTO who are aware of these things, and yet they put in no effort to defend the interests of Nigeria, of Africans. They don't. And you know, the funny or annoying thing is that we actually do celebrate them. We celebrate them. Ngozi Okonjo Iweala is seen as, oh, one of Africa's rare gems. But is she now? Like Howard Nicholas said, Howard Nicholas is a professor at the International Institute of Social Studies in Hague, Netherlands. Like he said, the West have designed a system to teach rubbish, particularly to African countries, and those rubbish are meant to make our so-called educated elites use those rubbish to keep us enslaved. If not, why would we have somebody like Ngozi Okonjo Iweala at the WTO? And then we are talking about lack of industrialization in Nigeria and indeed sub-Saharan Africa, and she does nothing. And people are clapping for her and hailing her as one of the heroes of Nigeria. It is such a shame because the WTO, together with the IMF and the World Bank, are some of the Bretton Woods institutions that are being used to keep Africa down, to make sure that Africa continues to be impoverished, to make sure that Africa never gets industrialized. What Africa needs is rapid, aggressive industrialization. Somebody like Ngozi Okonjo Iweala should know this. But no, while she was even the Minister of Finance, she could have exposed the fraud in subsidy. But no, she chose to tell us the lies that the Minister of Petroleum then, Diziani, was telling Nigeria. She was repeating it to us, telling us that there was a landing cost for petrol. Meanwhile, there was none. They were simply doing oil swap. And she had the power. She was in the rare vantage position to take Nigeria out of the mess that is in, to push us into industrialization. She could have reactivated Ajakuta Steel, but no. She was at the forefront of helping to kill Ajakuta because it was under her watch as coordinating Minister of the Economy and Minister of Finance that the wonderful thing that Yaradua did, revoking the license for Ajakuta to the Gomta brothers, it was under her watch that it was resuscitated, that we were even made to pay money to these fraudsters and gave up ownership of Ajakuta Steel. What a shame. In this country, we have the habit of celebrating people that are enslaving us. We need to open our eyes. We need to open our eyes. The only way Nigeria progresses is when we have a production leader. What we have now are consumption leaders, leaders that consume. You know, there was this story they gave about the locust and the ant. The locust, they consume. And after they finish consuming, they move somewhere else. We have low-cost leaders in Nigeria and many parts of Africa. They consume. After they consume everything, they relocate their families to Europe, to UK. Low-cost leaders, consumption leaders. And unfortunately, those are the signs that Tinubu is exhibiting. Meanwhile, what we need are production leaders. We need ants. People that are working, that will work to make Nigeria progress, that will take Nigeria into the path of production, which is actually the path of aggressive industrialization.